check. 2. This is a mic check. Great.
tank check. Decimal code. Is decimal code in the room? No? Decimal code? Joey? Oh.
All right, everyone, should we get started? So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the finals of the George Shultz Innovation Fund. If I haven't met you before, my name is Jay Schrankler. I actually head up the Polsky Center here at the university. So nice to see everyone. And again, thanks to all of you for your time and effort in this. Really appreciate it. I wanted to kind of cover 4 things today. So the first thing is I want to give you a little history of this. And I bet some of you have been here from the beginning. So Mary Tolan, of course, was so generous to donate this money to the university and enable this to happen. And I think it was roughly about 9 years ago or so. And this whole program started. So if you don't know my background, I was at a big company called Honeywell for about 27 years. Then I got into this stuff at universities, at the University of Minnesota. And I think we were quite successful there, and I'll give you a reason why it kind of intersects to this fund. Then I came here about 4 years ago. At Minnesota, we had something called the Discovery Capital Fund. We were so successful with licensing IP that we had this cash left over, put it in a $20 million fund, and it behaved much like this, the George Shultz Innovation Fund. But this fund started out, and I kind of tried to do my homework, as kind of a granting operation where it would give grants to make prototypes, etc. And then before I got here, it morphed into an investment fund. So kind of what you see today. And then I took a page out of what I learned from Discovery Capital, and we kind of put in place a matching. Like if we get an award of $250K, you got to go find $250K from a qualified investor, not friends and family. So I'm going to give you some stats since that happened in 2020. Since 2020, we've awarded, I want to say, about 6 companies that have raised matching funds. And each of those 6, we put in $250K. They've raised $14.6 million in matching funds. So that's a 10x lever. So I think on that measure, it's pretty good. 4 of companies are still out looking for matches. I think having that validation from the market, getting active investors involved, has been really important to this effort. And then we're lucky enough, and I'll use the word lucky because you never know, to have an exit last year with Supertech that went through the fund and also has went through our quantum accelerator. The next thing I want to talk about is a little bit about where we're headed here. So about 2 years ago, well, a year and a half ago now, I had a meeting with Michael Polsky, and we talked about the future of the Polsky Center. And one of the things about the Polsky Center, we said, is that it had this excellent footing in Booth, the NVC, all the derivatives of NVC, but we didn't feel that there still was enough done to incorporate the sciences, basically, into the startup world. And that really was something that was important to Michael as well. So Michael has accelerated part of his gift, as you probably know, as a result of that, to form something called Deep Tech Ventures. And so we have put this innovation fund under that umbrella, and we put Duality, the quantum accelerator, We have a new accelerator in data sciences called Transform. We put our Compass accelerator into that, and we got one coming in clean tech. And the other thing you may have heard about is that there's a new venture fund being formed outside the university, but we'll have a contract with the university to do deep tech venture investing. So we really hope that we're about to pick the general partner very shortly here, and then that fund will be raised, probably in short order. And that looks like that's going to be about a $25 million fund, early in Series A. So I think the Innovation Fund here could be a nice precursor to that, like a good feeder system. Let's see, what else I wanted to cover this morning. So there's 4 companies today. I mean, great companies. I've already heard the story about a few of them. And I want to congratulate them: Decimal Code, NovaXS, Blackcurrant, and PersonaDx. This whole world of the Booth alumni system, they found out about these companies, and I've already gotten emails from some alum who are VCs on the West Coast that says, can I get introduced to some of these companies? So, I mean, I think this really has a great lever. So, the other thing we have involved students in this program, as you know. I think as a university, that's really core to our mission. So we have these IFAs. One thing I do is raise money also for the university in my role. And so I recently worked with a Booth alum who just gave us a nice donation for next year to increase the number of IFAs. So I think that's really terrific. Lastly, even though I haven't met some of you before, you may have heard the announcement that I will be leaving my post here after 4 years at the university at the end of June. So, and I'm going to pursue a startup company that I've helped get formed with the Booth alum from last year. I had an organ transplant 20 years ago, and I wanted to get back to that. And so it's a company involved with that. But I will be in Chicago. I'll still be doing some things with the university in various volunteer ways and other ways. So I'll be gone, but not far. And thank you again, everyone, for everything you've done for us here.
Thank you, Jay, and welcome everyone. My name is Özge Güney Altay. I am the Director of Investment Strategy at Deep Tech Ventures in Polski. I want to start by saying thank you to the Deep Tech Ventures team, first of all, led by our Executive Director, Dan Sachs. We are actually a group of people who are just individually extremely talented, but also especially collaborative, and it's a pleasure to actually be working with them day in, day out. So I first of all thank you all very much. More specifically on the George Shultz Innovation Fund side, I would like to recognize some of my colleagues, starting with Emily Underwood. She's been a long-time supporter of the program, bringing her expertise from law school and helping contribute to the success of the program greatly. And on the Deep Tech Venture side, I would like to recognize my colleagues, starting with Steve Gould, Ellen Zatkowski, where is she? And Omkar Brave. They are just brilliant at what they do, and 100% dedicated to making this program a differentiated and successful one. I really feel privileged to be working with them on this venture. Today, actually, I want to specially thank Ellen, if I could locate where she is, because she is the architect behind today's event, bringing us back together in person after a long pause and attending to every little detail quite meticulously. So special thanks go out to her wherever she is. And on that note, I would like to thank our startup teams as well as our advisory committee members for being here with us today in person, traveling from near and far. And we will be introduced to our startup teams shortly during the pitch sessions. And today really is about celebrating their vision and their passion for what they do. But before we move on forward with the pitch session, I want to take a moment and have our advisory committee members briefly introduce themselves to the larger crowd. Steve, do you mind maybe kicking it off for us? Just a name and a professional affiliation. You need to turn on your mic, Steve, I think. We have a hard time hearing you. Thank you.
Sorry. I'm Steve Gould. I'm with the Polsky Center. I said I'm also on the advisory committee, but I can't sit with the adults, so I got my kid's seat over here.
Oh, we can just continue. Frank, maybe, if you don't mind.
Hi, I'm Frank Greco. I'm a principal architect with IBM. I'm a U of Chicago alumni of the math department and a Polsky mentor.
Thank you. Anya?
Anya Labna, I'm with KKR and our health team.
Sorry.
My name is Nito Amu, and I'm at Osage, a deep tech investor there. I invest exclusively in university startups.
My name's Armando Pauker. I'm with Facility Venture Partners. We focus on enterprise software applications of AI, but I'm also involved with duality and chain reaction and several of the other quantum-related efforts here.
Hi, I'm Charlie Polsky. No relation to Michael Polsky, but I'm still very happy to be here. I'm a graduate of the medical school and a biotechnology investor here in Chicago.
I'm Marty Sanders. I'm also an MD graduate of the University of Chicago School of Medicine in 1979. I've been pleased and privileged to be part of the Innovation Fund since its inception, where we used to meet on the second floor of I guess it's the Mies van der Rohe building down at the main campus, and there's a few of us here that remember starting it up, but it's a pleasure to be here again after the intervening pandemic.
Thank you, Marty. Alex?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Alex Lenz. I work for Driehaus Capital Management here in Chicago. I invest in all industries within healthcare, but spend most of my time in biotech.
Hi, it's Bob Altman, and I am at Polsky Center. I'm faculty director for a couple of innovation programs we have, and I also teach a course in entrepreneurship for scientists.
Hi, Scott Walbron. I'm a principal investor at BMW Ventures and focus on a variety of deep tech type investments, clean tech, hardware, and some software. And I'm also a Booth alum.
Good morning, I'm Scott Meadow. I've been a venture capitalist here in town since 1982 and a clinical professor at Booth for 25 years.
Good morning, I'm Doug Given. It's a venture firm out in Silicon Valley on Sand Hill Road, Health 24/7 Capital Partners. Healthcare and life sciences, our anchor investors are United Health Group and the American Medical Association. I've been involved with this process since 1993 and on the visiting committees since that period of time.
Thank you. Ken Bradley. It's good to see you all here. I've been doing technology commercialization both on the venture side and on the operating side for longer than I can remember, with a series of startups, some of which have gone public, some of which have been acquired, and I'm currently working on a semiconductor startup.
Morning, I'm Coleman Collins. I am a director of product at IonQ, who makes quantum computers, and former strategic technology and innovation consultant.
Well, thank you all very much. Thank you for being with us today. And with that, I'm going to pass the mic to my colleague, Omkar, so that he can lead us into the startup pitch session.
Thank you, Uske, and thank you, Jay, for the remarks. Hello, everybody. I just want to thank the teams, the advisory committee for your time today. Just going to walk through some logistics quickly here. The startup pitch will be 10 minutes. After that, we'll turn to the advisory committee for a 10-minute Q&A. And then after that, we'll have a few minutes to fill the feedback forms, which we would appreciate if the AC can do that immediately after. So with that, we're going to have decimal code presenting. So Joey, you want to come ahead?
Trigger the test. Is that working now? Sweet. Okay. You ready? All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I am Joey Pinella, the co-founder and CEO of Decimal Code, a startup which helps healthcare providers capture underbilled revenue through automated medical coding. Now, healthcare providers are facing an issue today in the form of denials, essentially in the process of getting paid from insurance. $262 billion worth of claims that healthcare providers actually earned are denied on an annual basis in the US. A large component of where these denials come from are medical coding issues. So reimbursement payments from insurance equate to specific current procedural terminology, or CPT codes. These CPT codes, the process that a healthcare provider has to go through in this situation is, let's take the case of a surgery. They'll submit CPT codes for what's called prior authorization before performing the surgery. Then we'll perform the surgery. The surgeon writes a text note based on what happens, and that final text note determines what then the final CPT codes are that the healthcare provider submits to insurance for the official reimbursement. Now, there are two big issues in this process right now. The first is that because medical coding is so manual, it's oftentimes just inaccurate. That can either be inaccurate from the word go, where someone just flat out gets it wrong, or due to the process of having the prior authorization and the final CPT coding, it can actually be just a misalignment based on the nature of surgery not necessarily going how you anticipated beforehand. Compounding this, because medical coding is such a manual process, workforce constraints mean that teams don't really have the ability to comb over everything and correct the mistakes that are happening. So only 35% of denied claims are ever actually resubmitted for proper payment. Kind of quantifying what this means in an actual instance of a large hospital system, then a group with $600 million in annual surgery reimbursements. The typical denial rate from coding is about 4%, which for this institution would mean $24 million in upfront denials. Since this team only has the ability to resubmit at a 35% rate, and again, this is typical across all of the US, that means they're only recapturing $8 million of that $24 million and simply writing off $16 million in claims that they actually earned. So who are we then and how do we help? We are Decimal Code, and we have an automated CPT coding solution that can code much more accurately than current processes and much faster to get rid of these bottlenecks that are hurting the process today. What we're focused on currently are procedural CPT coding modules, and so prior authorization, anesthesia, and surgery are really our expertise right now. We'll be launching our prior authorization module to market first, as it's got really clear financial viability and it's an easier implementation process compared to back-end CPT coding for anesthesia and surgery. The way that we're able to do this is a patented natural language processing machine learning algorithm that takes clinical texts and automatically assigns the proper CPT code. This technology was developed with 5 years of research out of the University of Michigan and has been supported by $1.6 million in non-dilutive grant funding to date. Our team also has a unique data asset in that our co-inventors lead a 50-hospital consortium called MPOG, which has enabled them to amass over 15 million procedural cases from which to build this technology. So in addition to the patent that we have a really unique basis of data that makes it very difficult to replicate what we've created to date. Revisiting then the case that we looked at previously, a group that had $600 million in annual surgery reimbursements, whereas the denial rate was 4% previously, we'd actually be able to cut that in half up front, and then we'd be able to resubmit at a much higher rate than current methodologies due to the nature of automation, meaning we'd actually be able to recapture 15 million of the 16 million this group is writing off today. Our progress to date, we began with model development in 2018 at the University of Michigan. In 2019, our co-inventors received a $100,000 MTRAC commercialization grant in order to fund a 2-year pilot with the anesthesiology department. That pilot ended up going so well that the University of Michigan came back to our co-inventors and said, how much money can we give you to get this everywhere? yesterday that results in the team receiving a $1.5 million grant in order to fund the build of the surgery and prior authorization modules. The team has since launched the prior authorization pilot at the University of Michigan, and that's really been our inflection point to begin thinking about commercial progress outside of the home institution. Our go-to-market plan then is to launch the prior authorization module to market first, sourcing lead customers via advisor connections that we've got. Through the University of Michigan, we have a former Henry Ford healthcare executive who's been advising us as well, making connections to hospitals, CROs, and CFOs. We're looking to really source a lead customer outside of Michigan and validate in the next year. Once we're able to do that, we'd look to launch our surgery and anesthesia modules as well and hire a sales team to really start to expand the marketing operations from there. Once we're able to establish our basis within the CPT procedural coding space, we'd look to expand the medical coding offerings beyond kind of our 3 base modules to date. The market that we'd be looking at, medical coding, is a large opportunity in the overall space, and CPT coding actually represents a $4.8 billion spend for healthcare institutions today in the US. We would specifically be focused on prior authorization CPT coding for US hospitals. That's large US hospital institutions as our beachhead market. That would be a $209 million opportunity originally. And once we expand to include our anesthesia and surgery CPT coding modules as well, we'd actually be looking at roughly a $900 million market opportunity in this broader space. Our revenue model, we'd look to charge on a per case basis. And so we'd also, for the anesthesia and surgery final CPT coding modules, then charge an annual cost that's related to implementation in the first year and then service in the corresponding years. And once again, we're looking to target large hospital systems. There are 417 such institutions in the US that have over 100,000 surgical cases per year. These are groups with a high quantity and diverse caseload that really are in most need of this type of technology. And should we be able to secure just one of these customers, you can see the corresponding revenue for each of the modules down below. From a competition standpoint, automated CPT coding is a relatively nascent space, but what we're very excited about is that nobody can offer the level of procedural expertise that we can to date. So others in the market right now, NIM and Fathom, are focused on emergency medicine and radiology because it's easier to get data in those fields compared to us having come from a research institution and being able to get data from all these 50 different US systems. Codometrics is actually the only other group that spun out of research, but they're more focused on ICD diagnostic coding rather than CPT billing coding. And again, their expertise is within bedside and pathology. So we think we've got a really nice lane to grab a good bit of this market share in what's a really growing space right now. Should we be able to do that, then there's been a lot of exit activity in this realm of late with 15 acquisitions in the medical billing and coding space happening in the last 5 years, and we see that as a really viable exit strategy. Our team then, who's going to be able to get this done, I'll start with the true brains of the operations first, and our co-inventors, Dr. Mike Burns and John Vandervest. Mike is a clinical anesthesiologist at the University of Michigan and our chief medical officer. John is the lead data scientist for the anesthesiology department and our chief technology officer. I myself am a current full-time Chicago Booth MBA, and in a previous life, I worked for the University of Michigan helping to spin startups out of the research institution. And I also spent some time in Michigan Medicine Central Finance to really understand the viability and necessity of this type of technology. Our milestones, we officially formed the company and licensed the IP from the University of Michigan at the beginning of this year. We're now in the process of sourcing lead customers outside of Michigan. We're launching the prior auth module to market, and that's what we're really going to validate on first. And once we're really able to implement and validate outside of Michigan, we then look to launch the anesthesia and surgery modules, grow our sales team, and expand operations from there. From a financial projection standpoint then, I want to point your attention to by 2027, we're projecting to have 18 large hospital customers, which would equate to over $30 million of revenue. We'd look to be margin positive by 2025, with most costs going towards product development in the first 2 years before transitioning to focus on sales and marketing in the corresponding years. Our ask today is $300,000, and excitingly, we have already a $150,000 commitment from the University of Michigan's Accelerate Blue Fund to match the George Shultz Innovation Fund should we be able to receive that funding. The ask would primarily go towards getting the prior auth module launched to market, acquiring your first lead customers so that we can really validate, and the funding itself would primarily be around getting technical hires in to work on the implementation and service for the first outside customer, as well as earmarking some costs for initial operations and conferences so we can spread our name and begin marketing activities. So with that, thank you so much, and I'd love any feedback and questions you might have at this time. Yes.
A couple quick questions. What's the scale of the Michigan hospital system in revenues?
In revenues, I believe it is a bit over $2 billion in terms of the medical, Michigan medicine. So it's separated like the university itself and the health system. And so I believe the health system is about $2.2 billion. And the surgery department is comparable to the example we had at the beginning of the slide.
Okay, and I've got a follow-up on. I think it's misnamed, prior authorization. You're doing coding efficiency. Prior auth is a handshake between all of the different insurance companies and all of the different hospitals. It's a nest, and it's a network, and it's a mess. So the network itself has to be established, and you're just talking about the hospital side of the handshake, nothing to do with the. So you're a coding business. You're not a prior auth business.
Yeah, so I apologize if I misrepresented that. We don't want to claim to be anything besides coding, but it would be specifically CPT coding related to the prior authorization process. So we don't want to miscommunicate, should we talk to a hospital system and say, hey, we're going to automate all of prior auth. We're specifically focused on CPT coding within prior auth, but that does represent a very large issue as a part of that process.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so my question's about your intellectual property.
Mm-hmm.
And so to try to word this question without there being too many components to it, how essential to your operation is your IP, and how vulnerable is this IP to having some competitor come in and try to create competing IP?
Yep, totally. So to be entirely candid, IP related to software isn't necessarily as protective as IP in like drug discovery or whatnot. What realistically is more of a moat that we have is the data we've amassed today from all of the different healthcare institutions. If anything, the IP, it's related to the way in which we process data. And so it's technically protectable, but it'd be probably like a huge legal fight, and at this stage, like more cost than we'd be able to really input if we were truly to go try to fight it. The IP, though, we see it as a very strong market indicator. It's difficult to get IP related to software and related to kind of handling of data. And so the fact that we were able to secure that is a really positive signal for us. But realistically, we see the data we've amassed as more of a protective moat than the patent itself. Yes.
What is the user experience of this software? Who and how uses it? Is it the physician using it on the front end? Is it your RCM coders using it on the back end?
It's the coders on the back end. So the way it's implemented at Michigan right now is it's essentially like a coding buddy, so to say, where we can actually automate a number of codes themselves and send them through without really having any need for a coder check. But realistically, the way that it mostly works is that the coders will be able to pull up all of the documentation that they normally see if it were kind of just like without using our automated CPT coding technology. But then they would have also our technology showing them this is the projected code, this is like the confidence interval we have around that, this is the backing behind it. And so we're able to organize all of that. The long-term vision is we'd actually be able to send everything through automatically, but it's tough to kind of transition the workforce processes to say, hey, blow up your entire coding operations and just from the word go, automate it from the start. What's actually pretty exciting is Michigan ended up on their own making the decision without like our co-inventor's recommendation to just frankly automate a large number of cases that have a certain confidence interval. And so the reality is a lot are being automated just like without any kind of validation from the coding team, but we're kind of viewing it as a coding buddy as well, where the coder can kind of get the associated information around it.
Got it. So it's more like a code assist for an actual coder who is doing coding, typically if they are in-house coders.
Yep. That's kind of the near term, and then the longer term vision would be fully automated in the future.
Got it.
So the technical work that's still yet to come, it strikes me as then not so much working through your algorithms, but operationalizing it so that it works in the processes that are at play at whatever hospital.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understood.
So what type, can you sort of characterize the technical work that you have yet to come, right? It strikes me from what you're saying, it's not so much in developing a better algorithm or, or methodology, but integrating it into the hospital system processes.
Yeah. So one thing I will say on like the better algorithm side is the phrasing our CTO uses is that it's a data-hungry model. So as we amass more data, it will become more accurate over time. But you're correct in that the implementation component of it is kind of the larger technical lift right now. The way it works currently, Michigan is an Epic site. And so we're built on-premise through a server, and that would really be how we'd envision kind of like a first implementation process with an outside institution going, just as it's easier to kind of do it that way rather than cloud. But Michigan is also now beginning the process of looking to set the technology up on the Epic cloud computing, so kind of like full integration rather than an Epic extract. So right now we're an Epic extract, and likely the first customer outside of Michigan would be on-premise rather than on cloud, but in the future we see a full like Epic integration as the long-term vision.
Thanks.
So from the competitive standpoint, what I thought I heard you say is that the market is kind of sliced and diced. You've got one part, somebody else has the other. So as a follow-up to what Marty was talking about, why couldn't someone else just come into your area? I mean, because they have, so, and the sub-question there is, what is your magic? What makes you guys so different and uncopyable, or whatever the right word is, that you're not worried about that?
Totally.
And your investors shouldn't be either.
Yeah. So really, it's difficult to amass this degree of data, and it really is only via like a research effort that a team would be able to kind of recreate what we've done. It's not like something that can happen within a number of months either. So if one of the other competitors decided, we're really going to go out and focus on procedural CPT coding, the 3 modules we're tackling to date, it wouldn't be like a quick process to be able to do that. So it's not to say that nobody would ever be able to recreate it, but essentially we've got a number of year head start on all of the other competitors, and it's difficult to do what they're doing in different spaces, so we also don't see it as being like a super high motivation for groups to kind of like deviate from their level of expertise right now. Like for us, it'd be difficult to get into emergency medicine because our clinicians that help build this are experts within the procedural realm. And so there's a degree of expertise in data that's really hard to replicate. And that's what we see as being really protective for us.
And sorry, Joey, if I can push on that.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, why can't RCM companies that are already embedded across hospitals across the country, or other EMR manufacturers, Epic, as you mentioned, who have access to these data at a much greater scale, many more software engineers, like much more at stake, I guess, here than you guys do? What allows you to outcompete those groups? Because it doesn't sound like your scale of data are greater, or that that there's, I haven't heard something secret from a data processing standpoint that one of those larger groups with massive R&D operations wouldn't be able to replicate.
Yeah. So again, I don't want to misrepresent it and say that nobody would ever be able to replicate this. It's just a very time-intensive process, a specific set of expertise that's necessary to do this. And so why just like a general like kind of consultative billing group wouldn't be able to do this is that's really just one of like the 3 areas of expertise you need behind it, because you really need the clinical side and the data scientist like expertise as well. And so I just want to like make sure I'm communicating that it's not that nobody could ever recreate this ever. It's just it's not going to happen in the next few years, and without a large amount of effort being put into it by one of these other institutions. So we've got a good degree of protection, but we've also got to get to market now and really establish a foothold, because if we don't, in the next 5 years, someone else will. Yes. Oh.
So back to the intellectual property, sorry to keep on that theme, but is it issued or do you have it applied for? You have issued?
Issued.
Issued, okay, so that was question one. Question two is, how applicable is this to a potential competitor who decides to do the same work in Mexico or in Canada or in Asia somewhere? I mean, you know, we live in a world where electrons travel quickly, information travels quickly, patents are applicable within certain geographies. Does your patent protect you against a competitor that could be in anywhere else in the world?
I'd have to double check and get back to you. I know it's a U.S. protection. I'm not sure if Michigan went ahead and protected in other countries as well. But I'm not sure for us if we'd want to really deviate from the U.S. in the near term either, just because it's kind of like a unique healthcare environment that we don't really see going international in the near term.
I understand that, but my question is, yeah, U.S. market. Can somebody put their operation outside of the U.S. and get business from within the U.S. because what they're doing is not patent protected outside the borders of the U.S.?
I'd imagine so, but they'd have the same issues that other U.S. competitors would have too, where it's just difficult to amass the level of data and expertise that's kind of necessary.
So nice presentation, Joe. I got two questions. One, I've been reading that prior authorization may be going away. So this may be your entry point. Are you concerned about that, or you're just, this is a way to get to the other larger markets? The second is a little more of concern to me, which is you're only raising $300,000. Your team right now includes you, who's a full-time student, and two folks that are employed at the University of Michigan, and you're going to use that to bring on two technical people. There's a long, hard sales cycle to health systems. How are you actually going to sell and scale with that amount of money and that personnel?
Yes, yes. So on the first question, and I'm sorry, remind me what was
prior authorization going away.
Yep. So to be quite honest, the prior authorization CPT coding module is very similar to the surgery CPT coding module, where it's a lot of the same CPT. I mean, it's all surgery, right? So it's all kind of like there's a little bit of a difference for prior auth CPT coding on the front end. But realistically, we don't see it as like a huge issue, because a lot of what's plaguing the space in the long term, it's going to remain once, like in a scenario where prior authorization is no more, we'd still be doing the surgery CPT coding, which would be a necessity at that point. And we don't really, at least from what we've seen from what our co-inventors have worked with different groups, it doesn't really seem like a near-term thing that prior auth would be going away. On the second portion, so we understand that from the company perspective, no one's in it full-time as of yet, but what is nice is essentially the University of Michigan with the grant is funding technical development for the IP. And so realistically, we have a workforce that's really advancing that side of the development. And so this would be mostly funding so that we can start to perform commercial activities as well, give our CTO the ability to kind of productize the algorithm, the technology, and implement with a different space. But we're actually very confident right now in the level of work that's being put in on the technical side based on the commitment that the University of Michigan has with the pilot.
It's the sales I'm asking you about, because you got no business unless you sell.
Yep, nope, totally fair. And so the way we're looking at it is we want to go and validate with one or two lead customers first, and then grow the sales team to really kind of expand all of the efforts. And so we're confident in our advisor connections right now. The Chief Revenue Officer of Michigan, the ACFO of the medical group have been very supportive and very willing to make introductions for us. And so we're confident in our ability to essentially, through our advisors, get in front of the right parties, sign on lead customers within the next year. And then once we're really able to validate outside of Michigan, that's when we'd look to grow the sales team and kind of expand that side. But we're looking to do it lean in the near term before kind of growing that aspect.
Thank you, Joey. I know there are several more questions, but unfortunately we're out of time here. So Joey, thank you for the presentation. Advisory Committee, thank you for the great questions. So we have about 4 minutes while the team PersonaDx is getting set up. If the advisory committee doesn't mind going and filling the startup feedback form for decimal code, that would be extremely valuable for us. So just if you don't mind doing that, and we'll get PersonaDx set up here, and they'll be up next. We're at time here. Up next, we'll hear from PersonaDx. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kevin Donnelly. I'm the CEO of PersonaDx, and we're transforming the diagnosis and treatment of metastatic cancer. I'm joined by my fellow founders, Dr. Ralph Weichselbaum, who's also a member of the faculty at the University of Chicago, and Dr. Sean Petrotta, who's also a member of the faculty. Also, we would like to thank the George Shultz Innovation Fund for this opportunity, and also thank our IFA team. And also would like to introduce one of our other members of the team who's a Metcalf Scholar in the college, who's going to be joining us for the summer, and that's Karen Zhao. So welcome to the PersonaDx team, Karen. I'd now like to turn it over to Dr. Weichselbaum to go ahead and kick off our presentation.
Thank you very much, Kevin, and thank you all for the opportunity to present. 25 years ago, Samuel Hellman and I hypothesized that cancer, the metastasis, which are the most lethal form of cancer, represent a spectrum rather than being always widespread. We called this the oligometastatic hypothesis, and after 25 years of laboratory investigation, randomized clinical trials, not done by us, this has become de facto standard of care for various forms of metastatic cancer, both in the United States and in Europe, and there's guidelines around this. The trouble is we don't know who to ablate, that is, whether to give radiotherapy, surgery, radio frequency ablation. And my colleague, Dr. Sean Petrotta, has developed a classifier which identifies patients who will most benefit from ablation in the face of metastatic disease. Additionally, his classifier also identifies patients who will benefit from chemotherapy. And this is a genetic test we feel in colorectal cancer, the second cause of death in the United States, is ready to go. We propose to expand this to other forms of cancer where clinical trials have shown that the oligometastatic state exists with the same expectation of being able to personalize therapy. Finally, we propose to use epigenetic markers to personalize radiotherapy. Right now, if you come for radiation and you have tumor X, we open a book and everybody gets the same treatment. Obviously, some patients need less radiation and some need more. So we propose to have a personalized, real-time genetic marker that can't be done right now with circulating DNA or other biomarkers. Sean?
Thanks, Ralph and Kevin, and thank you all for the opportunity to present today. We at PersonaDx, our mission is to completely revolutionize the way we treat metastatic cancer. And we have 2 ready-to-go gene expression-based classifiers that can serve as biomarkers to identify which patients with metastatic disease can be cured and which patients are unlikely to be cured with standard therapies. These are termed the 31 feature and the 150 feature signatures. They're versatile. They can be applied to existing genomic sequencing platforms to personalize therapy. In addition to that, we have a novel epigenetic-based biomarker based on 5-hydroxymethylcytosine that can be used in real time to adapt radiotherapy dose in patients where currently no such biomarkers exist. Utilizing these genomic sequencing concepts, in addition to advanced computational techniques and AI, we can provide real-time information to oncologists that can be used to personalize therapy for cancer patients. And we believe, although we're showing right now our data in colorectal cancer, that the results are a framework that can be applied to all or most human cancers. In terms of how this would work in the logistics, with regards to the tissue-based biomarkers, a treating oncologist would order a genomic sequencing, which is quite standard these days, in addition to the PersonaDx test. The testing laboratory would send us the genomic sequencing information. PersonaDx would apply patented classifiers and our computational techniques to decipher from the genomic sequencing information the type of metastasis and the expected outcomes in the biology of the tumor. PersonaDx would then provide that information to the treating oncologist with regard to the subtype and the prognostic information. And the treating oncologist would make key clinical decisions based on that information regarding which patients might benefit from more aggressive, potentially curative interventions versus those that might need just palliative interventions. And this has a potential to really radically transform the way we treat metastatic cancers. We have a strong, broad team that has expertise and experience in a number of areas that are relevant to our company. Ralph Weichselbaum is the chair of radiation oncology at the University of Chicago and the co-director of the Ludwig Institute for Metastasis Research. Ralph has been a pioneer in radiotherapy and oligometastasis, which has led him to be one of the few individuals in the world to receive the highest awards in both ASTRO and ASCO. I am also a radiation oncologist at the University of Chicago, and having worked with Ralph for the past 15 years, we've spent a lot of time thinking about metastasis and advancing concepts. As a radiation oncologist, I have expertise in treating metastasis, and as a scientist, I've developed bioinformatic tools and computational approaches for biomarker development that we've applied to a number of clinical contexts. And finally, Kevin Donnelly, our CEO, brings the required experience and expertise in life sciences, having served senior roles in many different companies, as well as significant experience in the startup world. And to date, we've had a very strong publication history based on our approach for molecular subtyping for prognostication and therapy prediction, having high impact publications in the Lancet Oncology and multiple Nature journals. And more recently, the approach that we're providing today has been accepted for publication in one of the top oncology journals known as JAMA Oncology.
Thank you, Sean. I'm going to talk a bit about the business model. So our business model is really focused on the United States as a starting point, and looking at those 5,000 hospitals in the United States and those independent practices out there as well of oncologists. Our go-to-market strategy is around partners and working with those organizations that already have established relationships that could extend their value proposition and business model. So for instance, we're already in conversations with genetic sequencing companies where, as Sean mentioned, our test would sit on the panel along with that genomic sequence. And so that would add to the precision that that genomic sequence is providing. The second area is around pharmaceutical companies. For those pharmaceutical companies that currently have oncolytic products on the market now, we would add a greater level of precision as a companion diagnostic as to what would be most efficacious for patients. But it's also true as they're developing new models such as immunotherapy. We're also talking and working with other diagnostic companies because we can provide a greater level of precision to their existing tests or also expand their opportunities as well relative to filling out their product portfolio. These sorts of molecular tests are currently reimbursed. So those CPT codes that were talked about by Joey in the last presentation are out there for molecular diagnostics. And so we're using an average sell price of $4,000. And so there's products out there like Oncotype DX, Mammoprint, Foundation One, and so on and so forth that would be examples of that, but not focused on metastasis as we are. And then really, this would benefit really across the board, not only patients, but really also when you take a look at the cost of treating metastasis and colorectal cancer can be up to $250,000 a year. And so we think there's a significant opportunity to bend that cost curve. Now, as Sean mentioned, our 31 feature and 150 feature are ready to go now. And we're continuing to do work on our epigenetic signature that was talked about 5-HMC. But we're ready to go now in that area, and we're also continuing to expand and taking a look at other tumor types as well. We have conversations going with all those different distribution partners, and so we look to launch the product towards the end of this year. And then we're also currently working through the regulatory path, which I can touch on in a second. And then our next step would be to move into those other tumor types, those other top 5 tumor types, and then from there move on to worldwide distribution. From a competition standpoint, I want to point out that we are the early first mover relative to metastasis. But these are the sorts of companies that are involved in this space, and we actually have conversations going on with some of these companies as well. Now, from a market opportunity standpoint, when you take a look at those top 6 tumors that are out there around the world, it's $24 billion a year from a market perspective. As you take a look at the United States, it's a $2.7 billion market, and specifically in metastatic colorectal cancer, it's $280 million, and that's where our focus is. But I want to explain that we will move upstream as well on that. Now, from a financial standpoint, because of our partner strategy, we're sharing revenues with partners, and we've already had good conversations in this area. So we think that we can build this company really leveraging that strategy without a great deal of expense to return down a great bottom line. And we bootstrapped this from the beginning, so at some point there would be compensation associated with this, which is why you see growth in some of those payrolls. And last but not least, this is the way we want to use the George Shultz Innovation Fund to really stretch out our regulatory pattern, our strategy, sales and marketing activities, and those areas. I'd like to start for Rolf just for a brief wrap up.
I think it's changed the standard of care once. I think that this will change the standard again, change the standard of care again, both by increasing cures and decreasing treatment morbidity.
Thank you.
Is this tissue-based sampling? So somebody comes in with a known colorectal cancer metastasis, and you would take tissue from the metastasis and have that analyzed?
Correct, yeah. So the initial cohorts that we analyzed were from the surgical resection of liver metastases from colorectal cancers.
And so somebody would come in following, they'd have their primary tumor treated, and then they'd come in for follow-up, they'd have metastatic disease. Now they're going to get their tumor genotyped, presumably separate from this. So this would be an add-on on top of a panel just to get the tumor genotype, correct?
That is correct, but it turns out that the mutations that are commonly sequenced are not prognostic enough to give us the information that we can obtain from the expression-based profiling. Our studies indicate that by complementing the expression profiles with some clinical factors, we can differentiate patients with stage 4 disease having 10-year survival of 15 to 20%, up to 80%. So there's a huge spread that you don't find with the mutations, and we've shown that in some of our publications, that you need to have the gene expression to get the prognostic information.
So is part of the narrative going to the treating oncologist and saying to them, you don't need to get a tumor typing, this is what you need. And so you're actually not doing this as an add-on to what they might be spending, but you're trying to tell them to replace whatever they're testing for with your test.
I think we're excited for potential complementation because there are some drugs where having the mutation information could be helpful. For example, in colorectal cancer, a KRAS mutation is associated with resistance to cetuximab, whereas we're also finding resistance to cetuximab as part of some of the subtypes that we're exploring as well. So they may be complementary, but also I think a lot of distinct information that isn't provided in mutations that is highly prognostic from our subtyping.
And this is very personal to me. I had a twin brother who had metastatic cancer treated at the University of Chicago. Had he been told it's not worth pursuing aggressive treatment because your likelihood of he would have gone somewhere else to find somebody who was willing to give him aggressive treatment. So I think from the patient perspective, my concern is, even though what you're doing is taking retrospective data and applying it on a population basis to a patient, they're the only patient. They don't care about the population. And if somebody
I would say maybe two things. One is the second data set we analyzed was actually a randomized trial. And the other point is that it doesn't necessarily mean avoid surgery, for example. It may mean we need to personalize the systemic therapy better based on the subtypes before you have surgery, or maybe a different approach should be taken rather than the standard for the patients that might have high-risk disease. So those are all studies that are ongoing, and I think having the foundation of the subtypes could be a way to sort of rethink how we move forward with clinical trials in this space.
Yes, sir.
So this is a theme for me. Intellectual property. What do you own? And on what data is that based? I didn't see data, and I like data. So how much data do you have, and how much IP do you have?
John, go ahead.
Yeah, so the data that was used to support the IP that we presented, there's basically two signatures. One is a 31 feature signature that includes both mRNAs and microRNAs, and the separate is a 150 mRNA only signature. The reason we approach it that way is because although many companies are performing gene transcriptional profiling, not all of the companies have microRNAs on their platform. So we wanted a versatile solution that could be applied to many, if not all, existing sequencing platforms. The data that was used to generate that was both from patients treated at the University of Chicago and some regional hospitals in our original Nature Communications publication, as well as patients treated on the new EPOCH randomized clinical trial out of the UK. So both of those collectively were used to train, test, and validate the classifiers. And they work very similarly with over 95% accuracy. So we feel confident that either one, based on the sequencing platform, would be successful.
And you have patents?
We have patents filed for both of those, yes.
Filed, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Top row there.
Do you have freedom to operate with the signatures, the Tushel patents and what came after, microRNA platforms, et cetera?
So at this point, we've not, are you talking about from a regulatory perspective with FDA?
No, from an IP point of view.
What was the question?
Do we have freedom to operate from an IP perspective?
In terms of the sequences, using them for forensics and diagnostics, heavily patented it.
Really the key of the patent is how we use, so the sequences can come from a diversity of platforms, but how do we use those sequences? How do we what's the mathematical calculations that we take from those sequences to actually make the predictions. That's really where the IP is surrounding.
Okay, so it's a derivative. That's good.
Yes.
The second question has to do with adoption. You talked about community oncologists, notoriously head in the sand. How are you going to get to the market?
Yeah, I think initially we wanted to go in from a partner perspective, but we clearly recognize that we're going to need to stand up a sales organization. And so in 2024, our expectation would be to create a sales organization that go direct into those markets. And we don't want to obviously compete with those companies that are distributing our product, but at the same time, we believe that there's going to be the need to be able to pull through. We also think that data, to your earlier point, really helps to sell this back out to the community oncologists. And so we think that's going to be critical. And we think that continued data is going to be critical for the payers as well. From a reimbursement perspective.
Yeah, one thing, apropos to the last question, it's not a question of should you get aggressive treatment, because there's a variety of aggressive treatments. Embedded in the classifier is who should get ablation as part of their treatment and who might respond well to chemotherapy. So once doctors find out that they can actually do something and get paid for it, they're probably going to order the test. At least that's been my experience.
Frank?
Yeah, you mentioned that this could be scalable to other types of cancers, and you do refer a lot to the sort of sophistication of the modeling process, right? So going forward, how much does your viability sort of rely on maintaining sort of a stable of modeler technique, people that are expertise in building your actual models?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we started with colorectal cancer for a few reasons. One, because it's obviously a huge factor for cancer-related mortality in the United States and worldwide. But two, the tissue is easily available at the time of a surgical removal of the cancer. But similar approaches and a framework can be applied, and we're actually in the process of testing the same framework in breast cancer, prostate, lung, kidney, and a variety of other common cancer types. And biologically, there would be a rationale for similar types of properties to be seen in other cancer types. But we are planning to utilize the existing classifiers and potentially train new classifiers that are disease-specific. But with further advancements and refinements of new classifiers, I think we could develop products that are very specific to different diseases, utilizing a common framework.
Yes, Anya?
Could you speak a little bit more about the reimbursement and how are you planning to, do you have a specific reimbursement for this procedure and what is the payment you expect per test?
Yeah, the way that we've pegged a reimbursement of $4,000, and that's average based upon what's already out in the market relative to these molecular tests. And so using tests like Mammoprint and Oncotype DX and Foundation One and kind of that realm from a molecular perspective. And so we think that's what's realistic, but the final determination would certainly be based upon certainly CMS and then those private payers as well.
Got it. So you picked an average reimbursement based on other, but you don't actually have a reimbursement.
That's correct. We do not have that yet. Yes. Sir, right behind you. I'm sorry, I can't see your name.
That's okay. I'm Alex. I'm a little bit curious about how you think about drivers of utilization. When you spoke about Oncotype and maybe some of the other tests that you've mentioned, some of those tests are supported by prospective data sets that included tens of thousands of patients in order to generate, to drive NCCN recommendations that drive utilization. Absent data sets sort of those, some of the other companies you mentioned, like Foundation, have massive sales organizations that have gone out to market. I guess you have neither of those two things. So what gives you confidence that you're going to be able to drive utilization absent NCCN recommendations or a massive sales organization?
Yeah, I'll start, and I'd ask my colleagues to comment on that as well. I think that it's our belief that really very little attention has been paid in this area around metastasis. And when you go back to the fact that 90% of the deaths associated from a cancer perspective are metastasis, we feel that we've got a novel solution to really be able to address this. We think that we can get scale faster by working with these partners that are involved in the genomic sequencing or the diagnostics or in the pharmaceutical side of things to bring that precision to be able to expand. But having said that, I absolutely believe we'll need to stand up a sales organization to be able to do that. We'll need to raise more money over time to be able to do that as well. Or potentially we partner to a greater extent with one of those companies. I mean, so that's a possibility as well. I think from a clinical perspective, I like,
Yeah, well,
both.
so just one thing I'd say is if you look at something like MemmaPrint, it's useful at the extremes. The same with the prostate test, really high or really low. Otherwise, they're pretty useless. For me as a doctor, it's pretty useless. Here, the differences in survival are really robust, much, much greater. So probably we'll need less data, but you raise a good point. The other thing that didn't get discussed was circulating up a genetic marker to modify radiotherapy. There's 1 million patients in North America that get radiation therapy that goes from 1 week to 8 weeks. And this, we didn't get a chance to discuss it. This would be a blood-based test that we're developing, and at this point it's more aspirational. Nonetheless, I think it's a huge market and eminently doable. So
I would only add that to Ralph's point that the reason they needed 10,000 patients to see those differences is because the differences are small for breast cancer. The extremes are huge, but most women are sort of in the middle. Here we're talking about a 60 to 70% difference in survival. And so the magnitude is much greater, and we're seeing those effects with much smaller sample sizes. But I think there are a lot of phase 3 trials that are ongoing now in a number of diseases, testing this oligometastasis idea that Ralph developed. The phase 2s have been wildly positive for progression-free survival, and now the phase 3s are testing overall survival. And I think as those results come in, there's going to be a lot more need to identify the biomarkers to select the patients that are going to benefit the most.
Okay, guys. Thank you again for your presentation. Thank you to the AC. We're a little bit over time here, but again, I'm going to sound like a broken record here eventually by the end of the day, but if you guys don't mind, on the feedback forms for the startup, that's extremely useful for us as we compile all the feedback and then eventually as we go into deliberations later in the day. Thank you.
Yeah. That's fine.
You good? Crush it.
Thank you. No, it's okay.
All right. Up next, we're going to hear from Blackcurrant. Akshay?
Thanks, Omkar. Hey, everybody. My name is Akshay Thakur. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Blackcurrant. I'm here to talk to you about the most exciting technology to decarbonize our economy. And it's not batteries, it's hydrogen. 60% of our economy can be decarbonized using conventional methods, which is renewables into the grid and other forms, while 40% of our economy cannot be decarbonized using batteries because batteries have hit their technical limit. And economic pressures, policy pressures, and efficiency pressure means decarbonization is inevitable. The problem is, how do we get there? Let's take an example of transportation as a sector. For passenger vehicles, lithium-ion makes perfect sense. You have a shorter duration, the weight of the car is not that much, so it's easier. As the light commercial vehicle, heavier trucks, buses, shipping, rail, and airliners come into the picture, it becomes very difficult to decarbonize them. And this is where hydrogen can be a very complementary solution to batteries. Amazon faced a similar challenge in their operations, and many years ago they moved away from fossil fuels to batteries and had issues charging. The time it took to charge the forklifts wasn't good enough, so they moved over to hydrogen. The reason I know this is because I was the one who led them to do this. I initially started with the pilots, got the investments to clear them, and then we scaled it across multiple continents. At the end, last year, Amazon bought $2 billion worth of green hydrogen to decarbonize their economy in the United States alone. This is a similar pain point that was echoed by other buyers and producers when we saw the market. So it's a very large market, and buyers have issues on the procurement chain where they want to get hydrogen, they want to use hydrogen, but it's very hard to find it. And even if you find it, it's hard to have a stable supply, a reliable source. And it takes very long to transact. And producers have issues in terms of finding the right buyers. They're always trying to find one big buyer to do it. So there is less transparency in the market. And like I said, it's a very large market based on the sentiment and the demand that is growing right now. It's a $10 billion market. And Department of Energy is putting $7 billion through the Hydrogen Hub program and the Hydrogen Shot, which is part of Earthshot program, to help push this market in the right direction. And it will achieve $90 billion of market size by 2030. Now the problem is it's going to be challenging to get to that size because it's very cumbersome to transact. When you transact in a refinery with hydrogen, it takes a long time. On an average, it takes 4 months, but sometimes it could be 6 or 8, or even longer. Because you have to find somebody on LinkedIn, call them up and say, hey, can you sell me some hydrogen? If hydrogen is such an important commodity, we should be able to find it like natural gas and oil. This is where Blackcurrant comes in. Our solution is a hydrogen marketplace where you can find different producers, if you're an off-taker, different type of hydrogen, and we also provide the carbon intensity associated with it. So you can take advantage of the credits issued by Inflation Reduction Act. And if you're a producer, you can gain quick access to the market, a fragmented market filled with smaller buyers in the transportation industry, power generation industry, heavy-duty industries, and logistics industries. What does that do to our problem now? You know, it's no longer 6 to 8 months, it's 1 day. So the transaction mechanisms allows us to transact faster, and the access to technology like hydrogen will make the market grow pretty quickly. And it's very important for the whole value chain to have a mechanism like this. The buyers have more price transparency. They have options in terms of different type of hydrogens. Producers have aggregated demand for them, so they don't have to do the heavy legwork. They know where the demand is growing, so they can have new production facilities built where the demand is growing. And then new transportation companies can come into the picture that can serve this market as well. Hydrogen hubs are being formed right now in US, where 33 applications were given a go-ahead by Department of Energy, and 6 to 10 out of them will get $1.25 billion. We actually have a hydrogen hub analytics as well that allows you to know which participants are trading today, which will trade tomorrow. We already have traction with our early adopter partners who helped over the last year and a half give us enough feedback and access to the market so we can build the right product here. And there are some pieces that you see confidential because all of those customers are transacting right now. We are going through a process of making sure we deliver the right product for them and have the revenue through the door. We are part of 3 hydrogen hubs already, where we are the entrepreneurship leader there, making sure we build a sustainable market for them. And since last June, we were part of NVC as well. We've gained some accolades and raised some money as well. So we've gained a lot of traction from Transform Accelerator, who's helped us connect with the right people and build the right products. So we have a machine learning and based demand aggregation profile and a price discovery model that achieves the target we've set. And we're also part of a clean tech accelerator that gives us access to Chevron and Microsoft as a partner. Now, how do we make money? We connect these buyers and sellers, transportation companies, storage companies, but we provide a subscription service where you can see the market information necessary to know what the pulse of the market looks like. And once you know it, once you're ready to transact, then we have the transaction fees. The transaction fees is per transaction basis, and it allows big customers to transact more and smaller customers to scale up quickly. Quickly want to talk about one thing. This year we are looking at a revenue of $50,000 with a 80-20 split, where 80% of it is coming from subscription fees and 20% coming from brokerage transaction fees. As the market grows, it will even out more because our customers would scale up and their facility will scale as well. So if everything goes well, what happens to our market? We would be able to remove 25.5 gigatons of carbon by 2050. What does that really mean? That means more than 5 billion vehicles off the streets for 1 year, and US reaches its net zero target by 2045. That's the scale of impact we're targeting for. We have the right team to achieve this target. I've built a hydrogen business before. I built a microgrid business in Australia before for mining sector. And Jaroslav is here with us. He's an expert in machine learning and AI models. He's building our product. And we have Oleg, who's currently in Houston. He has commodity exchange experience as well. And Brian recently joined our team helping strategic initiatives. And we have a great set of advisors who are bringing the right experience and right channels to ensure we can go to market quickly. A good example is Charles, who's a chief business officer of Cemvita factory, who's generating gold hydrogen from microbes. And they understand the value of a marketplace that would enable them to scale quickly. So this is how our platform allows small companies and big companies to scale quickly. So where are we right now? We've achieved 2 things, proof of concept, and we've have our MVP out in the market since December. With our customers, we are doing 6 different transactions in California, New York, Texas, and Canada. And this year, we'll be launching our platform production version in July. And next year, our plan would be to go to Europe and scale there because of the need that Europe has shown. Right now, we are raising $1 million, where we have a line of sight to $750,000. And we have partnerships with big oil customer as well, who is looking for partnership and investment. So we would love you to join us and be part of this clean energy revolution. Thank you. All right, questions?
What's to stop somebody else from doing exactly what you're doing? I didn't hear anything that sounds proprietary.
Yeah, so we have 3 different pieces that gives us a competitive edge here. One is we have the right team that gives us a head start because we've done the work in the market, so we understand the challenges around hydrogen. Second piece, we have a transaction engine we've built. So when a buyer and a seller are transacting, the whole transaction happens on our platform from their facilities, from the buyer side and the producer side, the transportation piece, commercial due diligence, and the close of all the documents. All of that resides on our platform, so there's a high switchover cost for our customers if they want to go to another marketplace. So even if there's a marketplace that comes up, the price discovery model, the transaction engine stays with the platform. So it's a bigger task for them to say, okay, let's go move all of our transactions to another marketplace. And then the third piece is the price discovery model and the demand aggregation engine are two proprietary algorithms that we've built with Yaroslav and Oleg and our customers. So that gives us an edge. We kept them trade secret because if you put an IP out there, everybody would know. And like we talked before, it won't give you protection outside the United States. Yeah, please go ahead.
Could you talk a little bit about your buyers and the kind of machines that are going to be run by this hydrogen, the availability of the machines, who produces them, and what's the scale of what they're using it for?
Yeah, absolutely. So from our buyers' perspective, there's, I can give you one anecdote at least. Last year, we got a call from a manufacturing facility in south of the United States, and they're asking, can you give us 50,000 kilograms of hydrogen for the next 2 weeks? And we said, hey, we just started the operations. We don't have a platform ready to go. So it'll be a little bit challenging for us to support you. This was a big steel manufacturer who has a $68 billion balance sheet, year-over-year recurring revenue. And they couldn't find 50 tons of hydrogen for 2 weeks. And this is the kind of problem we're solving from our platform. So we went back to them and said, hey, we've built the platform to solve this problem for you. You won't have this issue again. And currently, we're closing an agreement for that facility with them.
No, I meant, what's the use case by your buyers? What are they using it for? And like, what machines are consuming the hydrogen?
So this manufacturing facility is a steel manufacturing facility. So they're using it as either part of DRI process, or they can also use it at their furnace, which would be very expensive because you need a very, very high amounts of hydrogen. Then the other customer I can give example of is a fuel cell company right now that is using hydrogen fuel cells to back up a, let's say, like a Department of Transportation rest stop. And it would back up the whole facility on its own, and the hydrogen is delivered. So if there's any issues with the grid, you can run offline. So that's a power generation example. And then heavy-duty trucks, like we talked about, class 4, 6, 8 trucks can use hydrogen as well. Another example is hydrogen is actually not new. Biogas is used in lean burn gas engines for the longest time, and biogas has 40% hydrogen in it. So it's not new, it's just that the technology has evolved now in the last 20 years on the fuel cell front and the engines front, but now we have technology that can use hydrogen. And from a fuel cell perspective, the cost has come down from $3,500 per kilowatt to $1,500 per kilowatt today. And DOE published a liftoff report in March that says it will come down to $400 by 2030. And the investments are basically going into this specific technology to scale. And just to give an example, comparison, diesel generators are around $500 per kilowatt.
Just one point. Another important example is data centers.
Yeah.
Like Google, Microsoft switching their backup power system towards hydrogen fuel cells.
Yep. Go ahead, please. Yep. Yes.
So I'm just wondering why you're perhaps not forecasting a lot more transactions on your platform, and this is going by the $50,000 number, given that this is something that reduces, 4 to 8 months, I think you said, to a one-day transaction. So why isn't everybody on it?
Yeah, so here's an example of a customer we are working with right now, where they're going from one facility in California to another facility in New York, where the challenge in New York is liquid hydrogen is actually, you can't move it. So we are helping them do those two things. But here's a chart of, they're trying to go 450 facilities in the next 3 years. So we've built this strategy to ensure they can scale quickly. So here's the analysis we do for our customers to make sure they understand. This is just something for us to present, but on the platform we have actionable insights because the data is useless if you can't provide insights. And that data will help you make the right decision. So you can see the price sensitivity when you try to increase the number of producers. So the rightmost column says on the bottom, it says $14 for more than 10 producers. So as the producers reduce, the price reduces as well. But if you want more reliability, your price would increase. So that's the kind of analysis we provide to our customers. So we could scale, but we want to make sure in the next 1 year, with 1 million, we want to achieve product market fit with our early adopters. That's what we are targeting for.
So just to follow up, so are most people just brokering transactions on a bilateral basis
Yes.
for huge contracts?
Yes.
And in which case, is that the market you're going after? You're going after the person who just needs to cover a day or two?
Well, the markets aren't different, but that's a great question. It's not different. It's one big chaotic black hole. Because we don't know from an opaque space, if you don't have initial transaction setup, you can't have long-term transactions. As per DOE, you need long-term anchor tenants to ensure you can reduce costs in the market. So that's an absolute necessity. We are ensuring the transactions happen quickly and you can scale quickly. So that you can do for a small customer as well as big customers. So it's part of one piece, but we are supporting both. That's why I gave the example of a steel company and a fuel cell company. They are operating in a very different scale. Steel company gets 50,000 kilograms and fuel cell company is taking 60 kilograms a day. But it doesn't matter to us what volumes they're driving because we are an agent of the transaction itself and reducing the cost of transaction. Thank you. Sorry, Ken, go ahead.
Hi. With renewable electricity, the cost is really determined by the initial capital investment. That's quasi-free on an ongoing basis. That's not the case with hydrogen. How do you expect the price of hydrogen to be driven down to the point where it can be utilized as broadly as you're hoping it will be?
Great question. So that's a function of the market itself. Renewable energy prices like wind pricing, solar pricing is determinant in hydrogen production. So that's what the slang for it is, green hydrogen. Then there's blue hydrogen where you're producing hydrogen from natural gas and using a carbon capture storage to remove carbon from it. So if you take those two as examples, the price would depend on the fuel you're using for it. So if your renewable energy prices keep on going down, the hydrogen price will keep on going down. So it depends upon which index would it be connected to and the volatility around it. Just to provide an example, in California market, if you go today, the average price for hydrogen, even if you're getting natural gas-based hydrogen, it's like $10 to $12 per kilogram. And if you go for green hydrogen, it's even more than that. It's like $20+ per kilogram. So it really depends upon the source and the pricing for that source. And that's why we have our price discovery model, which actually looks at the local area utility prices, natural gas prices, the renewable price indices, and then figures out what the volatility looks like for you, because we know where you're buying from and where you're selling from. So that's the actionable insight we are able to provide our customers so they can make better decisions. Again, the key thing is we are not determining the price. We are making sure you can transact fast. And as the technology evolves and more hydrogen is produced, the price will come down on its own. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, putting aside the domain specificity of hydrogen, right?
Yes.
How would your approach or methodology be applicable to other markets like the oil market or coal or how electricity is traded as well?
Maybe just quick comment. We plan to expand beyond just strictly hydrogen into adjacent markets like e-ammonia. That would be a great example. You use the same process basically, and the base for the contracts will be the same.
Yeah, so we are focused on the transaction part itself, adding to what Yaroslav mentioned, if you can see on the screen here, ammonia, sustainable aviation fuel, all of these new technologies that are key part of our community have the same bottleneck. So we are taking the transaction engine issue out. And so that's the part that's scalable. That's the reason we chose it. Hydrogen cannot be moved over long distances. But what you can do is move a derivative of hydrogen, which is LOHCs, which is liquid organic hydrogen carrier. So you can convert those and move them across Atlantic and across Pacific. Yeah. Go ahead.
So a follow-up. So these adjacent markets, do you see those as potential sources of competition?
Oh, no competition. That's actually support because we can
issue.
issue
The platforms that support the trading of those.
Yeah, none of those are a commodity right now, and they're not traded. So those are actually helpful for us, as these challenges are out there, and we actually need a lot more support to achieve success in the market. So, I mean, yeah, there's definitely more need for the other platforms to come up as well. I feel like there will be more competition, and we're banking on it. Go ahead, Steve. Sorry, one more question.
I think we're. Yeah,
right.
sorry. I think we're at time here. So
Yeah,
thank you,
thank
Blackcurrant team, and thank you to the AC for a great question. Again, if you don't mind filling up the feedback forms for the startup, those are extremely useful. Thank you. Up next, we're going to have our final startup presentation from NovaXS. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan. I'm the co-founder and COO of NovaXS. At NovaXS, we're building the next generation of smart needle-free drug delivery platform for all the chronic patients. Couple investment highlights. We're building a needle-free drug delivery platform that has proven to deliver better patient experience, faster absorption time, and boost the efficacy. Our closed-loop platform enables pharmaceutical companies to reduce their cost of goods by 30% and increase revenue with better compliance. We have a wide patent portfolio for our core technology on drug administration process and also accuracy automation. Our current investors, including Baxter, Edward Amherst Health, MHub, and Techstars, to provide us access to the healthcare industry. And we have built a highly motivated team to support it by the strong board with track record of establishing and growing large industries. The problems we're solving at NovaXS are three parts. The first, we're still using traditional needles to deliver all the injections. However, needles cause pain and skin irritation. There's also a high administration error, over 56% nowadays in the United States, associated with needle injections. This leads to low medication adherence. And no medication adherence is costly for every stakeholders in the ecosystem. Because of the low medication adherence, our actual client pharmaceutical companies could not maximize their profit. They're losing profit for every non-compliant patients, and also there's a high cost and supply shortage for auto-injectors in the market nowadays. Medication non-adherence, as I said, is very costly to every stakeholder in the ecosystem. The US government is losing $290 billion every year for non-compliant patients. Pharmaceutical companies are lost over $600 billion revenue because of non-compliance. And even patients themselves have to visit hospital 3 more times because of their non-compliance to their treatment. Therefore, we created a closed-loop drug delivery platform that allows patients to administer medications subcutaneously or intramuscularly without a needle and tracks long-term treatment progress. Here's how our technology works. Sorry, the video is not working. Basically, how our technology could work is it could automatically pull the medication out from the vial, expel the air bubble, and verify the dosage volume with 1 click of the bottom on the base station. After loading the medication, simply remove the injector from the base station, placing on the injection site, and the medication will be delivered within 0.3 seconds. After the medication being delivered into the body, the medication adherence data and dosage volume data is automatically connected from the device, and then we have created a digital solution for a 2-way communication channel that provides the patient and providers to report any side effects or to track medication adherence. So here's an automated user journey. Simply attach the vial and the injector to the base station, load the medication, and then complete the injection within 0.3 seconds. So how our technology could transform the remote healthcare? We are actually beneficial for every stakeholder in the ecosystem. For physicians, we're helping them to make informed decisions and early interventions based on real-time data. For pharmaceutical companies, we're reducing their cost of goods by 37% and increased revenue from better patient compliance. For patients, we're providing them a better solution and a better delivery method to support their user journey. And for payers, we're connecting accurate, quantified medication adherence data from our IoT sensors. So in terms of our competitions, compared to other needle-free technologies or auto-injectors, pre-filled syringe, our device is actually the only needle-free technology in the market that could be reusable, and we automate the whole process, also track the medication adherence. Most importantly, because of our nature of the business, we're targeting pharmaceutical companies, our cost is significantly lower compared to other needle-free solutions and auto-injectors and pre-filled syringes in the market. So just further strengthen why pharmaceutical companies would likely to partner up with us. For example, if we're talking about 2 million users medication, weekly injections every year compared to auto-injectors, which is the most current solutions, we could save pharmaceutical companies up to 21.8 million every year on cost. We're looking at a large market. We could target at least 80% of injectable drugs in the market, and our initial therapeutic areas include diabetes, severe obesity, infertility, and IBD, account for over 90 million US population and a total available market of over 50 billion. Our business model is simple. We're typically licensing our technologies to pharmaceutical companies and conduct a co-development with their drug. And we will charge them upfront licensing revenue and plus royalty sharing once we reach commercialization stage. Based on our competitor Portal's deal with Takeda, it could be up to 100 million per partnership. And once we reach the commercialization stage, we could monetize from metadata and also target insurance reimbursement. Here's our R&D and commercialization timeline. We're targeting FDA approval for the first indication by Q1 in 2025. We have validated our market unmet needs with over 30 pharmaceutical companies, 35 clinical sites, and 4 payers. And right now, our device is performing an ex vivo study at Texas Tech, and we have a sponsor from a pharmaceutical company, NovaXS. We're using their Ozempic GLP-1 medication and test the efficiency and the consistency of the delivery. After the ex vivo study, we're going to launch our in vivo study with our partner, Charles River, and we have already identified 2 clinical champions, one Dr. Dermo at Cedars-Sinai on IBD disease, and one Dr. Albish from UCI Health on diabetes. We're going to launch the IRB clinical study in Q2 2024 and file master file to FDA. Once we file the master file to FDA, we could license our technology to pharmaceutical companies and start the licensing deal. We expect to receive the first clearance in Q1 2025. We have built an awesome team, and our team consists of entrepreneurs, scientists, inventors, and also healthcare executives who have experience in commercializing cutting-edge technology to the market. We're also supported by a strong advisory board. Advisors from NovaXS, Merck, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Organon, who know the business, who know how to commercialize a drug delivery device to the market with pharmaceutical partners. We have raised over $1.6 million up to date from Baxter, Techstars, and a couple institutional VCs, and we hope to receive a $250K co-investment from GSIF, from Polsky, and this funding will help us achieve 12 months runway, completion of ex vivo and in vivo studies, engaging with pharmaceutical partners, and also onboarding key hirings. And in Q4 this year, we're going to launch our $8 million Series A, and this raise will help us to get the first 510K clearance for the first indication. And thanks for being here, and please join us on this exciting journey to deliver the medication in a more safer, more efficient, and accurate way. Thank you. So I'm here joined with Dr. Haley, who's our CMO. Yeah, please.
So I have 2 things. Intellectual property you mentioned. Can you describe a little bit about the breadth of the coverage, both in terms of claims as well as geography and duration of validity? That's question number 1. Question number 2, I'll put a personal perspective on this. So I inject myself every week with one of those GLP-1, and I have a cabinet that is literally full of used injectors because I'm too lazy to put them in a bag and take them down to some waste disposal place and get rid of them. I didn't see within your presentation a discussion of the waste management advantage of your system. And so I was going to ask you to describe for us, since it's reusable, does this have an advantage over those little pens that I use every week to, inject myself? Is that something that you've considered as one of the advantages of your system?
Yes, so to answer your first question, we have filed 3 patents in both US and China, and we're about to convert those 3 patents to non-provisional patents next month. And we're going to file 2 more patents to protect our technology. The patents will cover the automation of the administration, the vertical alignment technology, and also the mechanism of the delivery method, because we're using an electro spring, which is different from other needle-free injections. And to answer your second question, that's a very good question, because for us, we're more sustainable, because the disposal part, it's just the cartridge at front, which costs 40 cents, and there's no needle at all. It's without a needle, a cartridge, and also for pharmaceutical company, that's the reason they want to partner up with us, because compared to auto injector, just like you said, those pens, it's a waste for them, and every pharmaceutical companies are going green right now. That's why they want to move to another sustainable.
And even compared to other auto injectors that either use a needle or do not, we actually have 10 times the capacity to inject. So 10,000 versus even 1,000, which is the highest on market right now. And the cartridges can be reused, or they can be pre-filled from the pharma partners and utilized and then recycled.
Yeah, so I'm just throwing some numbers out here, but there's maybe 30 million people in the United States that are injecting themselves weekly with something or another, or at least injecting themselves monthly with something or other. You start adding or multiplying the number of people times the number of cartridges, the amount of waste that goes into something, be it landfill or some other recycling apparatus, is enormous. And it's just, I see very clearly that an advantage of what you have is the opportunity to mitigate the amount of waste that's occurring because of the advancement of medicine to these injectables that has as a side product all this waste that's going into some place.
The other thing Jonathan briefly alluded to with the images is that it can actually load already existing vials. You don't have to create a new vial for our med device. So that also limits the waste.
Yeah.
Whoops, thank you. How many people have you tested this in? How many have you actually run and looked at how well they do and how it works and so on and so forth?
So first of all, on our device, we only tried on ourselves because it's not, FDA cleared. We haven't reached the IRB clinical study stage, but we do have secondary data supporting that. Patients with needle-free technology has better patient experience, less side effects, and it's less painful compared to traditional injections.
Okay.
And what we have planned so far, just to give you a timeline, is right now ex vivo studies are being done on porcine and human skin from the NIH. That will be completed at the end of June. And then we're doing in vivo mini piglet studies, which is very similar to human for an animal model. That will be done by Q3. And we are in conversations starting IRB protocols for different disease and therapeutic areas to do diabetes and IBD as soon as Q3, Q4.
So did it hurt?
It's less painful compared to traditional syringe, especially for frequent injections. Just like it becomes more and more painful because you're gonna have those hard knots on the skin. But for needle-free technology, there's no hard knots at all.
And I had one other follow-up question. So if you partnered with Ozempic, tell me about your revenue model, what you guys would be getting there.
Mm-hmm. This is a very good question because what we view about
making money is always a good thing, right?
Exactly. For us, we don't view us as a medical device company. We're actually part of the pharma supply chain. Whenever they sell a drug, we get a piece of it. Our cartridge costs about 40 cents. If we charge them about 50 cents per each cartridge, for Ozempic weekly injection, it's going to be 48 weeks, 48 injections per year per patient. So on every patient, we could make 10 cents out of it. So that's the good part of our business model. By partnering up with pharmaceutical companies, we're no longer a medical device company trying to sell into hospital, trying to sell to patients, but we're going to sell with their drug together.
So you think you're going to get a licensing fee based on their sales?
Right.
Because of your device. Because the efficacy and utilization that you will give them is so much greater than what they have now. With all due respect, I think that's a bit of a leap, and maybe you've had these discussions and things like that, but getting a licensing fee where you guys really didn't do any of the development, I mean, I'm sure you could get something, but maybe a big challenge.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, it's not about we're not doing anything. We actually have to clear this with FDA on every indication. So for example, for Ozempic could be, NovaXS has Ozempic, right? And Eli Lilly has identical drugs like Trulicity. If we partner with NovaXS, we're gonna get clearance for Ozempic together. It's a drug-led FDA process. So we're going to do all the regulatory work for that licensing. And our device will only be applicable for Ozempic, not Trulicity. So that's the competitive advantage we could add for pharmaceutical companies.
Same thing with biosimilars for IBD, as Humira has lost its recent, patent.
Can you share some of the data on absorption and bioavailability? And one reason why the injection may not hurt is because the drug isn't going anywhere. And can you talk about any parameters in terms of the size of molecules, the formulation viscosity of what you can inject? Maybe if we can start with that first.
Yeah, sure. So for the volume-wise, we could deliver up to 1.0 milliliters within 0.3 seconds, and viscosity up to 38 cp. We could do intradermal, subcutaneous, and intramuscular.
And sorry, where's the data that shows any of this?
Right now, we're validating this data. And for secondary data, we show, because for needle-free technology, the mechanism might be different, but how the medication being absorbed and into the body is the same. So those secondary data could, be equivalent to our device, applied to our device as well. We have seen needle-free technology because after injecting and delivering the medication into subcutaneous or intramuscular area, the medication will diffuse. It's a diffusion rather than an injection. That's why it could faster the absorption time.
We also have kind of hot off the press, unpublished data that we've just been collecting the last 2 weeks, ex vivo, with a subject matter expert in Texas Tech, showing with our device that large volumes are getting in at the levels that we would expect them to for subcutaneous is what we're targeting right now.
I'm sorry, do you have side-by-side evidence where you are injecting the same molecule where you can compare what your bioavailability and absorption is to what a subcutaneous version of the same drug is going to get that shows that you have all of those parameters?
By the end of June, yes, we will have several. Right now, we're injecting essentially different, what I would call control solutions with dyes, so we can actually measure exactly where it's going, the volumetrics and the depth. And then, Jonathan mentioned we're partnered with Nova Nordics. At the end of the month, we're directly comparing needle versus needle-free.
Yeah,
and then we'll go immediately into
And wait, no, we only have 1 minute. I'll follow up with you with the data.
Yes.
I have a follow-up question to Robert's question on the revenue model. I just want to make sure I get it clear. Are you licensing the technology to a pharma company, or are you making a cartridge and selling it to a pharma company?
I think we have an appendix slide.
Yeah, and this really depends on the pharmaceutical companies. For example, for Nova Nordics, they do have a medical device unit. But versus another medical pharmaceutical companies, we're in discussion with Organon for infertility drugs. They don't have a medical device units. So it's really a case by case. We'd love to get in deep with this, in the future. Just trying to answer every question like, the judges might have.
Ken, you have 8 seconds. Did you still have a question?
Okay. you sort of very quickly, I was curious about the internationalization of your IP strategy that you alluded to, which is just the United States and China. And I'm also curious whether you imagine this being ultimately extendable to sort of continuous or kind of basal application of drugs.
Yeah, because for right now, we're only filing the provisional patents, and we're going to convert that to non-provisional patents next month. And when we convert that, we could file, I forgot what the form is called, but we could file that form, and we have 1 year rights to maintain all the patents right in other states.
And our current regulatory pathway is with the FDA in the US.
Yeah, thank you everyone for the questions.
Thank you, everybody. So while the AC committee fills the forms, this concludes the morning session of the startup presentations for GSIF. After this, the rest of the sessions are going to be closed door. So just wanted to thank you to the general public who's here, as well as people on live stream for tuning in. If the advisory committee, Polsky staff, as well as the startups can stay in the room, that would be much appreciated. But that concludes this session. And then I'll talk about the next steps here in a few minutes once the AC fills up the forms.